Hello, my name is Erica, and I will be covering the topic of breaking down silos and developing open communications and its importance within organizations. So, if you look at any feedback survey that you hand out across an organization, and you go to the section where you're asking about feedback about what can a company improve on or what can we do better, you'll see a lot of responses dealing with something to do with communication, whether it's increasing the amount of communication, improving the techniques of communication, or something along those lines is usually bound to pop up. Now, with our culture today, it's a lot harder to have good and open communication because we live in a technological world, so there's a lot of barriers, both physical, technological, and emotional, and so on. So you'll see a lot of these issues coming up. A lot of the issues that I addressed in my paper were the importance of managing the power distance within your organization, as well as making sure that you are communicating that your employees are doing a good job or what they can improve on, as well as also talking about issues with clarity within communication. So going into power distance, we see a lot of times in cultures, like Turkish cultures, we'll see a very high power distance. And power distance is when roles that are higher up, you don't usually mix with people who are ranked lower than you. And this power is really reinforced, and you don't usually see people who are lower on the power totem pole giving advice or giving their feedback to those who are higher up in the totem pole of power. So to talk about the power distance, I talked about a company an organization that I used to be a part of. Within this organization, there was a lot of issues with people in leadership not using their roles properly and also not thinking about impact versus intent. An example of the power distance issue within this organization was when we were having a meeting and one of our leadership positions, one of the people was trying to get the meeting back on track because it kind of got derailed. And instead of thinking about their tone and how they were presenting themselves, they came across as very rude when asking one of our general body members to quiet down and focus and get back on track with the meeting. This power distance had been an issue for a long time, and it had affected our retention rates as well as how people perceived those in leadership within the team. To bridge that gap in the power distance, I suggested to the person who was upset with how the situation was handled, I suggested that they go to the person who was in charge and talk to them about this issue. And through that meeting, they were able to arrange a meeting with the person in leadership who had really hurt their feelings. And they talked about the impact versus intent, and making sure that you're managing that through power distance is really important. Now moving on to making sure that you're being clear with your directions. I talked about a company called Blue Line, which is a construction rental facility company, and they rent out this equipment. Well, they had a TSI rating of 3, and the score needs to be under 1 to ensure safe and cautious procedures and just ensure that everyone's safe. Well, it wasn't under 1, it was over by 2 points. So the issue that they faced was clarity. They weren't clear on the issues that they were facing. They weren't clear on the processes and their health and safety regulations. To improve this, I would suggest looking at your organization and asking yourself, how are we handing out this information? Is it presented in multiple ways for people who are dealing with other learning, who take in learning different things different ways. If we're being accessible to those people, and also suggesting breaking it down. If you're doing in-person meetings, break it down into smaller departments. With departments across an organization, they each have their own culture. So this is important to pay attention to. One final thing that I would suggest in creating open communication and breaking down these silos is ensure that you're telling your employees when they're doing a good job and when they're not doing a good job. And if they aren't doing a good job, make sure that you are talking to them and telling them how they can improve. Give them specific examples. And an example of this is with an organization, and they use the acronym in the article that they talked about as NHS. 70% of their employees said that they had not been properly praised. They weren't getting good feedback about how they were working. And just making sure that you're communicating with your employees and saying, hey, you're doing a really good job at X, Y, and Z, but you could really improve on these next couple of things. And giving them examples as to how they can improve would really help create that open communication. And also make sure that you're able to receive feedback 2 ways. Don't just make it a one-way street, because when you are giving feedback to those who are lower on the power totem pole than you are, that's going to create a closed off gap, and they're going to feel like they can't come to you and be like, hey, I know you're my boss, but I really think you could do better at this. Just going about this and creating these important open waves of communication is really beneficial to the success of a company. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.